Hi, guys. Tuesday afternoon live. 2 lives in 1 week. Let's see. Hi. Hi, Annmarie. Wait, hold on. Let me see. Anne-Marie's right there. See if I can get her on. Let's see. Accept. Oh. So strange.
Hi,
Hello.
how are
Yay.
you?
It gets easier and easier every time I do one of these. The
How
first
are you? Good evening.
Good evening in Ireland. You're so far away.
I know, so near yet so far.
I know. Anne Marie, I said on my stories this morning that I was getting my hair cut last week, and I was showing my stylist something on my phone, and your photo that you had sent me for the article had popped up, and she was like, "Those bangs." She's like, "Please, please let me cut bangs for you like that." And I was like, "I think we both know that I'm not Annmarie O'Connor. I cannot pull off the bangs." You're fabulous. Fabulous. Well, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, I don't remember how I found you or when I found you, but when I did, our lives are very different, but our stories of Parkinson's are very
Yeah.
similar. And I just immediately connected with your story. And so, for those who don't know you or don't know your story, tell us a little bit about first your fabulous career and your writing and all of that, but then also we can talk a little bit about your Parkinson's journey so far.
Yeah, I am a fashion editor. I've been the fashion editor of the Irish Examiner for 15 years. I work freelance. I consider them home, so much so that I moved to Cork. I used to live in Dublin.
Okay.
And Cork is where the paper is based, although it's a broadsheet. I've done work for the likes of the Sunday Times Style and various different magazines. Um, I've written two books, The Happy Closet and The Happy Medium. Both are about using considered choices to find the middle path, like satisfaction, that kind of sweet spot. Not too much, not too little, somewhere in between, I think, which is what we're all kind of looking for in life. And yeah, I've worked as a stylist since I think about 2008. My main love, though, is fashion. Has been fashion writing, but I've since kind of broadened out from that. Yeah, the funny thing was, it happened. My Parkinson's journey started in lockdown. There was a brief respite during COVID restrictions, and I was able to do a photo shoot because I had for many months no money coming in.
Right.
So yeah, so I was like, yes, let's do this. And I came back from the shoot, and it was a few days later. I had a frozen shoulder, a really bad pain in my arm, which was unusual, but I mistook it as carrying heavy bags because that's what we do. It's a lot of, lugging heavy bags, and it's not very glamorous behind the scenes. So I was like, oh, I just pulled a ligament, tore muscle, something like that. And then about 2 weeks later, that was followed by a very fine tremor. In the meantime, that shoulder got progressively worse. So much so that I was unable to like remove my bra. I remember lying on the bed in pain, crying, and going, I have to take a shower, but this bra is really expensive. Do I take a shower with the bra on? Do I cut myself out of it? I can shower with the bra, and I can dry myself off with the hair dryer. And I got to see my sisters at Christmas because there was a brief lockdown respite. In Ireland, we had quite a draconian lockdown. It was on and off for a long period of time. And they noticed the tremor, and they just said that that's not cool. Like, you've got to get that seen to. And I was like, yeah, but at the time they were putting kind of a moratorium on anything that wasn't related to COVID. They were like, look, if you can not come to the doctors,
Right.
because, obviously there might be people who are coming for every ache and pain. So they're saying, look, anything that isn't mission critical, please leave it until, the restrictions lifted, which was around March. And I went to see my GP, and she even took pause, and she was instrumental in really my diagnosis, because she saw it through to the end. So this between March and September 2020, I went for 3 MRIs. I had one on my shoulder, one on my neck and spine, and one on my brain. They all came back negative.
Mhm.
In the meantime, my symptoms had increased from the fine tremor, went to quite an aggressive tremor in my hand, all the way up to my shoulder. I was dragging my right leg. I had a reduced swing in my right arm, none of which I noticed. It was my sisters, when they came to visit me, would be like, why is that happening? Because I have very, very protective older sisters. And they're like, you need to sort that out, younger sister. Great, because it was a set of eyes that I didn't have. And it was around November. Our Christmas deadlines are always due. And I managed to kind of get through that. Um, okay. And then around December, it just escalated. My right hand started to cup inwards. I
Mhm.
couldn't brush my teeth. I couldn't apply makeup. That should be deemed a hate crime. I couldn't even open like a bag of coffee. I had a fight with false eyelashes. The false eyelashes, like, yeah, they didn't go on that day. But so much was genuinely wrong that I was saying, okay, like, I couldn't, my handwriting got cramped and really
Mhm.
small. And I
Mhm.
used to joke, I was like, oh my God, my Christmas cards look like ransom notes. But my third MRI had come back, and my doctor said, it's negative. This is just, I'm sending you into the A&E. You'll be there for the whole day from 9 until 4. She said, bring a sandwich, bring like a book, and prepare to be there for the day. So I was there at 9. I saw a nurse, a neurologist, another neurologist, and then who would be my consultant neurologist. So 4 different people. And then I was diagnosed with Parkinson's that day.
Oh,
So I got the
okay.
shock of my life, because I kept thinking it was a trapped nerve that wasn't caught by the MRI. And it
Right.
was my consultant who said to me that as you probably know from the DAT scan, which I had afterwards, that confirmed the Parkinson's diagnosis, the clinical diagnosis. He said, apparently the MRI doesn't capture Parkinson's because it lies a few millimeters below what an MRI will bring up of the brain.
Right. Right.
And like, I remember he was like, do you need to sit down? I was like, yes. And I didn't really take in much of what he said until he said, look, I want you to come in next week, bring a friend, bring someone with you who'll be a second set of ears, because I know what I've said to you today. It's just, you're not going to process it. And you probably won't process what I say to you the next time. And he was right. And I had my best friend come with me, and we both swapped notes, and I was literally
Right.
writing things down.
Um,
And it was like a crash course in dopamine. And yeah, it just, from there, yeah, I could go on and on,
yeah.
but it was, that was December 16th is my diagnosis day. So that's 3 years ago. This Saturday will be
Wow.
my anniversary. Yeah.
Gosh, it's so similar because same thing. I was in the middle of the pandemic and I was working all the time. I too am a freelancer. And so I, was working, trying to keep my clients that I had. And I was typing. I started with just a very mild sort of sense of tingling in my hand. But the more
Yeah.
I wrote, the more I couldn't get my pinky and my ring finger to push down on the keys. And
Yeah.
writing is such a huge part of my job. I was like, this isn't good.
Yeah.
Same thing, had a CAT scan, had a MRI, saw my neurologist, saw my GP. And then not until last fall did my hand start doing the thing, the cupping, when I was walking, it
Yeah.
wasn't swinging. And it sounds like from your experience, you had great doctors who sort of pushed for answers with you. I did too. I had one
Yeah.
doctor who sort of downplayed it and told me, you're fine, get over it.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I had great doctors who really pressed for an answer, but I know that's not the case for everybody in this space.
Yeah.
So it's good that I
I've
feel like
heard the
we're
same
lucky.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are lucky because a lot of people get gaslit by
Yeah.
their medical provider, whoever that may be, and just told, oh, especially, you think during a time like COVID, people would just be like, come on, buck up, you'll be fine, you
Right.
know. And I've heard totally different stories. Like I've been nothing but blessed from my GP to my consultants. But I think one of the takeaways that I learned is how to advocate for myself, because I think the Parkinson's journey only begins with your diagnosis and your first meeting with your consultant. There's so much to take in, and having a crack team around you, whether it's your family, your community, your spouse, whoever your close, your kith and kin are, and then everything from whatever you need, whether it's an occupational therapist, a physiotherapist, because everyone has their own iteration of what Parkinson's looks like for them, is
Right.
so important. I this summer I had a bit of a dip, and I had an escalation in some symptoms, and I noticed that I was spending about 2 days of every week on like going to the hospital, going to see my GP, collecting medication, going to the physio. And those were like days that I had to recoup as a freelancer. So it's important, even when you have that, community around you, it still can be a lot. Like there's always going to be those peaks and troughs. I mistakenly thought that when I was diagnosed that it was a question of just take your medication and you'll be fine.
Right.
And it was, my consultant says, Annmarie, it just manages the symptoms. Like this
Right.
is progressive disease, and it's something that you have to be very actively, I think, involved in. You can't be passive with Parkinson's.
And what have you, how has your, have you started working? Were you always a physical person? Did you sort of begin working out more aggressively afterwards, eating differently?
I've always been, I'm not, typically athletic. I'm very tall, and I
You're in
think,
fashion
yeah,
for a
my
reason.
mom, I remember when we moved to Ireland, I was suddenly on the basketball team, and I used to be able to, I used to score for the other team. So I was constantly benched. I think my mom may have had a word with, like, the nun who was our principal, and just said, please put my daughter on the team. You can just have her on the bench. Just please, just
Help the mom out.
give
Help
me
the mom
something.
out.
Give me something. Yeah, I'm not naturally athletic. I like a bit, I used to do a lot of yoga, not so much. I've always been a walker.
Mhm.
Maybe it's the New York genes in me. I don't know. I like to walk a lot, and that's what I tend to do. So I do the one thing that I know I'll do because I'm lazy. I will, I won't go to the gym. It's just not going to
Yeah,
happen. So,
not your thing.
we're not going to, go down that road. But I'm very active in my life. So I do anywhere between my Fitbit is like 10,000 to 20,000 steps a day.
Wow,
So, like
that's a
I'm
lot.
only, yeah. So like I'm pretty active, like, but I'm not like doing whatever the latest thing is. What
Yeah.
is it? The bike thing, like
They do
so.
say hit rides or hit any high intensity interval training
Yeah,
is really good
that
for
scares
it.
me.
It's hard. I will say I've really leaned into the working out part. It's hard not to get tired of it.
Yeah,
Like I think there is something to be said for finding the thing, in your case walking, that you really
yeah.
like and can continue and be not fall off the horse, if you will, because I think that's more important than anything. Like getting active and being active and doing something that you're willing to keep doing is the most important part, I would
That's
imagine.
the most important thing. Yeah, because I had a conversation with our Parkinson's nurse, and she kind of said the same thing. And it's
Yeah.
like, I think like it depends on the person. I have a friend who is more like, give me 20 minutes of high intensity and then
Yeah.
I know it's done. But for me, I'd be more inclined to say, I need to go get some groceries today, a few groceries. I'll walk to the store and I'll walk back up because I live at the top of a hill and there's an incline. So
Yeah.
like you get your heart pumping without feeling
Yeah.
like you're going to pass out. So it's kind of like sneaky way of getting
Yeah.
exercise.
Whatever works. Whatever works.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love what you say about the peaks and troughs, because I have times when I feel, even in the last couple of weeks where I have felt so good and my symptoms are so well controlled, and it's almost like you can forget, for a little bit that
Yeah.
this is happening, and then it sort of falls off a cliff and they come raging back and you're reminded of sort of what you're dealing with.
Yeah.
But that's a good way to explain it, because it's, when people ask me all the time, how are you doing? How are you feeling? It's such a complicated answer. Like if you look at me, and probably you too, and you might
Mm.
get this sometimes too, you would never know. People tell me all this all
Yeah.
the time, like, I would never know you have Parkinson's. But you don't see me when I'm tremoring or when you're strapped on your bed trying to get your bra off. Like there are
Yeah.
things that people don't
Yeah.
see. Um,
And like when you're going out, like I found that obviously I'm only going to go out if I'm feeling good.
right,
And people would say, "Oh my God, you're looking great." And I wouldn't be out if, like you said, I was shaking like a
right,
leaf, because
right,
I'd be too self-conscious,
right.
or I just wouldn't have the energy. Like I think what people who don't have Parkinson's, and why would they realize? They don't realize how much energy you expend in being hyperkinetic. And
Yes,
especially if you're
yes.
tremor dominant, your body is always moving, and it's like, oh,
Always.
good gracious.
It is. It's
Just want to
exhausting,
stay
and
still.
it's like this sense. Sometimes I feel like when my tremors come back that I'm nervous, and I'm not nervous. Like I'm not. I don't
Mm,
actually feel nervous, but I sometimes tell people when they ask me what it feels like, it's like being in a constant state, almost of anxiety or
yeah,
heightened energy because of what's happening to you, and that makes you feel self-conscious too, because you're like, I'm like a tuning fork. I'm like constantly
yeah.
moving quickly inside. So yeah, I think expending energy is a huge piece of it, and conserving energy is not something I'm great
Hugely
at.
important.
I tend to go until I hit the brick wall, and then I have to lie
Then
flat for
don't
a
you
day.
find, like, if you expend too much energy and you like do the dog on it, whether it's work or whatever, the next day you're
Oh,
you're
yes.
exhausted. It's almost counterproductive.
Yes. I've had big work events. I'm an event producer, and I've had big work events where I feel so good, even up until the last
Mm.
minute of the event. And then for 3 days, I'm flat in bed.
Yeah.
Um, and it's counter to who I am, because I tend to like to go, go, go. But
Mhm.
I'm learning that, sometimes when you expend that much energy, you have to recoup it, in the next couple of days. And it's just one of the many joys of this disease
I
that
gave
I'm
up
learning.
styling for that reason. I was kind of at the end of my journey with it anyhow, because I'm 50 and I was 47 when I was diagnosed. So it's a very like physical job. And that's something that people don't see, is the
Mhm.
constant lugging of clothes and
Yeah.
hauling of boxes and opening things. Like I never had a manicure until recently, or like kept a manicure, I should say, because I was always chipping my nails on something.
Yes.
Now I'm like, oh my God, I have nails.
Yes.
But
It's
I
true.
just wouldn't be able to do a job as physical as styling a shoot or a show or something like that. A big event, because of the amount, like you said, the energy it's involved. It's just not worth. And you don't know when you're going to get a flare up,
Right.
so
That's the
you
problem.
just can't
Right.
call it. Yeah.
Right. So tell me a little bit about your writing journey, because I'm a aspiring, I want to write a book. How did you always, had you studied writing? Was it just something you fell into in your career? Was this something you chose? Were you a model? You were a model. You did some modeling first, right? I think. Did I make that?
No, I did some modeling by accident. So I was writing actually for the Sunday Times Style. My editor was saying, "Well, you modeled for us and I was like, "Me?" And they're like, "Yeah, yeah, just like put on the clothes." And I
Right.
was like, "Oh, now you're actually getting a model for free." No,
Smart.
it was fun. It was like I was due. One of my first shoots was with a drag queen. So it was for a. It was this is years ago in 2009. It was a shoot about Christmas party dressing, and she wanted a different take on it. And so I styled him, and I styled myself, and we just had a ball.
Oh,
So, and then after
so
that, I
fun.
started doing some modeling. But ever since I was a little girl, it sounds so cliched. The only things I ever loved to do was read and write and color. And I just always, English was what I excelled in. I did my degree in English and Italian, and then I did a master's in literature and publishing. And I kind of went around various jobs did jobs that had nothing to do with my degree, but took the edges off me. So I worked in radio for a while and stuff like that, and which was great because a lot of the skills are very transferable. And then I started working in freelancing as a writer because I've been doing it on the side, but I thought I may as well give it a go. So yeah, I I just love it. I've made a career out of it. It hasn't been easy. It's
Hmm.
not something that, your bank manager wants to see. I'm sure they'd rather see, that you're a finance
Yeah.
director,
Right, right, right,
not a freelance writer, because, oh,
right.
that makes a lot of money,
Yeah.
and a stylist on the side. Oh, yeah, yeah, it's not great if you're looking for a mortgage or something like
Right,
that, I can
right,
tell
right.
you. But if you're looking for fulfillment, it was definitely a joy for me, and still is. That Happy Closet was the first book I wrote, and that was in 2015.
Uh-huh.
Um, I had a business, it was a closet clear out business. And in it, I learned so much from the women that I'd worked with. I saw so much, it was a psychological journey. And I created these different closet types from the different kind of personalities over the years that I'd seen, the types of whether you're a hoarder or whether you're someone who, gives away all of your clothes or whatever type that you are, and how to address those. A lot of it had to do with what we now know as mindful shopping. So how to be a
Mhm.
conscious consumer and not be swayed by impulse buying for the main part, which is what seemed to be the biggest bugbear that people had, in terms of having a closet full of clothes and nothing to wear. So there was a
Right.
lot of psychology behind it, but it was all very tongue in cheek. And a lot of it, I drew on my own foibles from the years of wearing things that I had no business wearing, and the amount of money that I spent, and threw away, one might say, on clothes that just didn't suit who I was, the person that I was today.
Yeah. Oh, that's so interesting. I've never thought about closets as a psychological experiment, but that's
It's
fascinating.
funny because I moved to Cork. I used to live in Dublin, and Dublin is, a bit more urbane, and like my closet reflected that. I would take the tram in and go for drinks, and it was just a bit more, urban.
Yeah.
And moved to Cork, and I live in a beautiful area, but like I said, lots of hills, and it's verdant and green. And I was like, I don't have anything
This
casual.
is this is not a cocktail party time per se.
I've got to get myself a new wardrobe, but I like it's about. So I had to almost like it was
Start over.
a bit of reflection, like looking back at me going, oh, now you've got to walk your own walk now. You're going to have to
Right.
start building a wardrobe that reflects where you live.
Right. Oh my God, that's so
Yeah.
fascinating. What an interesting concept for fashion, because I mean, I've always just sort of gone to the store. Like I am a full-on impulsive shopper, and I'm sure I've 100 times have said I have nothing to wear in my closet. So I'm gonna have to read your book, learn how to pare it back. Oh, it's so interesting. Well, one of the things that my sister and I have done is my sister is a professional shopper. Let's put it that way. I think
Yeah.
I introduced you to her online, I think, but she spent some time as her title was chief shopper for eBay or shopping.com
Wow.
in London.
That's
Yeah,
a job.
she's just a marketing guru sort of. And so when I was telling her about having trouble doing my makeup, and I was so frustrated by it, she was like, well, there has to be a solution for that. Like there have to be products
Yeah.
for people with Parkinson's or other disabilities. And we sort of went down this rabbit hole of finding different products, and she would send them to me and I would send them to her. And so from that was born this sort of new site that we created to talk about it. But you too have sort of taken a new view of the fashion industry in the light of your own diagnosis, right? I mean, I think um,
Yeah.
even just the story you were telling about not being able to, get your own clasps done, it's so interesting to me that I never thought about it until it affected me, and I'm sort of ashamed to say that. But now that I'm sort of in this space and you're in this space, what have you learned about the industry and sort of adaptability?
I've learned that the fashion industry is way behind. And I loved A to She. Saw so many products on your site that,
Oh, okay.
especially the makeup products,
Yeah,
and you're right, with
amazing.
limited dexterity to be able to have a handle that you can get a
Right?
handle on that like isn't
I
gonna
know.
like jump out of your hand.
I know.
Um, and to your point, I was, hand up, I have to say, until I had experienced it myself. And I think that goes for a lot of people until you're actually in the trenches. You don't you don't tend to see what's, until you have the lived experience.
Right.
But having said that, I've come across some brands and platforms that do it well. And I think they're, with there's a great, this wonderful, wonderful advocate, Sinead Burke. She's Irish, and she's paved the way really for inclusivity in terms of design and universal design. But in terms of like adaptable fashion, there is a great platform. It's a European platform called Zalando,
Mhm.
and they have done incredible work in being not just creating a one-off inclusive line or adaptable fashion line. They've worked with an inclusivity agency in order to ensure that they were going about it that they were led in the right way. So nothing for us without us, that
Right.
phrase.
Hmm.
Everyone that they used represented the disabled community. They so like everything they did from the marketing to the models to how things were framed on their website. And also there's, I think they had a special landing page for the adaptive fashion range, which they're adding to. So it's not just a one-off thing. So that was interesting because obviously there are, I would imagine, other products, maybe footwear isn't as easy to, get the same critical mass maybe as, clothing. So
Right.
they're constantly adding like new products to their range. So it's not just a one-off. So they've done an immense job in terms of um, how they look at things. I think there's so many, in the same way that I suppose greenwashing is an issue.
Hmm.
I would imagine, in my opinion, that there are certain brands that maybe are turning out maybe one-off,
Right. 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 Right.
ranges. So in terms of and in terms of a platform that I see has longevity and went about doing it the right way is
Hmm.
like a great case study for how to do it. I would definitely say it's Zalando.
Okay, that's good to know. Yeah, I agree. It's sort of in a good way, I think, a hot sort of topic for people right
Yeah,
now.
yeah,
It's gotten a lot of visibility, I think, with people like Selma Blair and others sort of jumping into this space. But I agree with you. There's some that are doing it better than others, and some that are more committed to it than others, than just
yeah.
sort of doing it for performative reasons. So, and yeah, we've been sort of uncovering that as we dive into that site. But I feel as though I like the term universal, because I feel as though
Yeah,
products should be, and I'm so new to all of this, so if I get some of this terminology wrong, forgive me, everybody. But um, the idea that products should be truly universal, that they can be used by me before I had Parkinson's or me
yeah.
after, I think is just the most fascinating part, because everybody can benefit from ease of use. And yeah, it's just such a fascinating world to me, this whole
And
process.
I think as well, it's worth bearing in mind is that in terms of disability, if you're, 25% of, I think it's 1 in 4 Europeans, and I think it might be the same statistic in the US, correct me
Mhm.
if I'm wrong,
I think so.
are disabled.
Yeah.
But also there will be a time when you will be disabled,
Hmm.
even if it's just temporarily, whether you've broken your leg skiing or falling down the stairs or whatever it may be. So to your point, to be able to have that universal design that suits you now and may suit you, if your
Yes.
circumstances change, is not, it should be the kind of the standard, the
Yeah.
gold, not, yeah, it should be the benchmark against which all things are measured. Yeah.
I credit you, Annmarie, with accepting, with helping me to accept the term disabled. You wrote on your site or in an article, I think, that I read, that you had come to terms with it, or you just used it. I don't even know if you struggled with that term. I struggled with it at the outset, and I credit my sister for sort of helping me through it, because two reasons. One, I think women, especially of our age, are sort of pushed into this, I call it the lean in phenomenon, where we have to do it all. We must do it all,
Yeah,
their weakness, admitting that you can't do it all, is in some ways a weakness. And so I've always sort of had that mentality of, push, push, push. Don't admit that you have any kind of weakness. And to me, at the beginning, saying that I was disabled felt like weakness. One, I'll admit that, cringingly now, looking back. And two, I also felt like I didn't earn that title, that
mhm.
that I, had seen so many incredible pioneers and read so many incredible stories about people who had been dealing with a disability, physical or neurological disability, their entire lives. And I felt like I'm brand new. I just was diagnosed.
Yeah,
What right do I have to equate myself to a community that has been in this trenches for so long?
yeah,
Um, but then I read what you wrote, and it just sort of opened this mindset to me of, I would like to earn my place in that community, because I am, by definition, by legal
yeah,
definition or otherwise, I am, and I will probably be progressively more so in my future,
yeah.
as we both know. But was it hard for you to come to terms with that term, or you were just okay with it?
I was, I remember, no, I, I felt the same as you did. When I was writing that article, it was the Disability Act of 2005. And um, when I read the Disability Act of 2005, I qualified as disabled. Um, yeah. So, and to be honest, although I'm feeling well now, for a very long period of time, I wasn't.
Mhm.
It's anything that impedes your ability to thrive. I was unable to do my job. I was unable to, for a period of time. And I've written about this in various articles, so apologies. I'm always assuming that, people know this, because I don't want to be like, being, oh, there she goes again.
No,
She
no.
said that already. There was a period of time, and it was at the end of 2001, the first year that I was diagnosed. I was going through various medications, none of which took.
Okay.
I was on levodopa, but I was on adjuvant therapies that worked to, no degree, or had an adverse effect,
Okay.
where I felt high as a kite.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
that was not good. And I had to come off certain things. And basically, my tremor got worse. It was so bad around November 2022. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah.
2022? Yeah,
Yeah.
2022. Yes, 2022. Sorry, I'm getting my years mixed up. I couldn't write without, I was holding my hand like that, and like that's how I had to write. And I was trying to think, can I write? How much can I write with my left hand? What am I going to have to change? I've an excellent boss who was incredibly lenient and understanding with me. So much so that the podcast that I helped write and produce, Living Your Best Life, was thanks to my boss, because she wanted to give me something that didn't involve me having to constantly be at my laptop.
Oh,
So I'm so incredibly blessed, not only with like great, medical assistance, but with an incredibly lenient and understanding boss. It wasn't until February, 23 this year, when I started on new medication, um, which had its own set of issues, but it reduced my tremor by about 85%. I also had aggressive restless legs that were so bad. They were bilateral. They were constantly going day and night. I couldn't sleep. I was getting maybe 3 hours sleep a night, and this is for months. So not only was I unable to write, I was sleep deprived as well. So that is disabled,
Right.
um,
Right.
in the sense that you're incapable of doing your job. You're incapable of thriving. You're incapable of getting through the day. You know, like I thought, Jesus, this is what it's like to have children. Like having 3 hours sleep a night, and
Yes.
waking up constantly,
Yeah.
But all joking aside, like they were awful. It was the question over my future as well.
Mhm.
What was I going to do for work?
Right.
I
Right.
was underemployed anyhow because I wasn't able, like you said, about leaning in. I wasn't able, like I was normally so productive, able to, turn out copy. I was barely scraping by, like
Right.
barely. It was not good. And then, yeah, so that was a real dark night of the soul that year in particular, the last, no, the last 6 months, yeah.
Yeah.
From
So
about August
your
to, it escalated to December.
yeah,
Yeah.
your experience through that, I think, is probably what makes you have the sense of, I think both, not, I wouldn't say fear, because I've had similar situations like that. It took me a while to get on the right meds. And you have this, not you, but the universal, you have this sense
Mm.
of sort of, um, yeah, I think it's fear about what the future holds and
It's
how you
weird.
will be able to do the things that make you you. I mean, for me,
Yeah.
writing was always about, for work, for me, was about mostly script writing and writing appeals and writing annual reports and stuff
Yeah.
related to fundraising. But my fear in that moment was, what am I going to do? Like, this is who I am. I've never done
Yeah.
anything different. And so, yeah, acceptance.
Yes, your identity.
It is your
Your,
identity. Yes.
yeah,
I mean, and then I
yeah,
think for so many women nowadays, again, I go back to the lean in phrase. Like we have worked so hard to make work part of our
yeah,
identity, and to
yeah.
keep, especially for me as a mom, like it was very important that I continued to work as an example to my daughter and to my son too. And so those moments when you're like stripped of the ability to do the thing that makes you who you are really raw and terrifying. And so, yeah, that's what I think of now when I think of, pushing through and being accepting of sort of the concept of disability. It's because I've had, like you, those moments where I'm like, oh, this is it. This is the real deal.
But
So,
even aside from the identity piece, there's the practical issue of putting food on the table
yeah.
and paying your rent or your
Mhm.
mortgage. Like I live alone. I only have myself to rely on. And you kind of think I have like an amazing family and whatnot. But at the end of the day, I'm a, I'm 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 my family. I have to be able to look after myself, and that brings me back to your point about saying that you need help.
Yeah.
And that's always been an issue for me because I've always valued my independence,
Mhm.
and having to admit that I'm not well, or I need help, or I'm struggling has always been, that's been something, a big piece, I think, for me in terms of getting past my ego
Yeah.
and kind of breaking down those walls and saying, you know, I need help with this certain thing. And
Right.
that's okay because we all do. We all need
Yeah.
help with something. At some stage in our life, we are all going to have to, put our cap out, so to speak, the proverbial cap out and say, can somebody please help me with this?
Yeah.
Um,
So true.
and it's a case of, I think, swallowing our pride, but you also get a different perspective on yourself, and I think you learn to look at people with more compassion, and more empathy. And we use those words very interchangeably and quite, they're very, on vogue to use at the moment. But really, when you break it down, like it's only when you go through it yourself that you're like, okay, I get it now,
Yeah. Yeah.
and when someone helps you, it's I don't know what I'm trying to say with that. It just I suppose for me,
I
like
think it changes you. I think
changes you.
I feel changed this year, and I say this often that you know, saying that Parkinson's is a gift is a very strong term, and
Yeah.
sometimes when I say that,
It's a
people
gift no one asked for. You don't ask
yeah,
Santa for that.
yeah. Some people bristle. I get some direct messages that are like, well, you only see it as a gift because you're so new to it. Just wait. And I agree. You know, despite the symptoms that I have had to deal with, I'm not in the thick of it. That I probably will. That I definitely will be at some point. But I
Mhm.
think that the ability to relate to others, my
Yeah,
understanding of suffering has changed just
yeah,
tremendously in the past year. And I see people who have situations so much worse than my own. And I'm so grateful for the
yeah,
support systems that I have, that it really, truly, I hate to say it, but I am grateful for the
yeah.
change in perspective that I've been given from this
That's a
disease. And
wonderful,
yeah,
that's spot on. I think
yeah,
that's the perfect way to say it is it's a change in perspective.
yeah.
That's the
It's not
clarity that you
easy.
get.
It's not easy because I will say, and I got
Yeah,
a lovely message from somebody yesterday who had just been diagnosed, and she's in sort of the throes of those early days, which
yeah,
I'm sure you can relate are truly horrible because you are
yeah.
scared and you are unaware of, you know, what your future now holds.
Hmm.
But I think a year into it, I look back and I think to myself, you know, I am going to work less.
Yeah,
um, I too need to work, but I'm going to work less because I need to spend less time stressed. So
yeah, yeah,
shifting the kind of work I do, I think will help me in a big way. And I just think, you know, I don't quote unquote sweat the small stuff as much as I used to even a year ago
mhm.
at this time. So I quote Michael J. Fox often. He says it's the gift that keeps on taking, and it's just it's the perfect description. You know,
It still is.
yeah, it's hard. It's
Yeah.
hard. So what's next for you? You're writing for the Examiner. Are you going to do another book?
There might be. So I'm always kind of working on creative stuff, but I have a Substack blog that and blog is so funny. I had a blog in 2008, which I had for 4 years, and I loved it. It was called I Blog Fashion, and I was one of the first fashion bloggers in Ireland. And it's so funny now because I remember I just used to put up a bit of text and a photo, and that was all it
That was
was.
it.
And now everything is like singing, dancing, TikTok. I'm like, oh my God, I would so suffer if I were like blogging now, or whatever they call it. Sorry, I sound like archaic,
No,
but I
I know
like
what
that
you
they
mean.
still call Substack a blog because
Yes.
I feel like I can relate to that. So it's called Wanted, a Responsible Adult. And it's about kind of navigating midlife without having a midlife crisis, with a bit of Parkinson's on the side. So,
Just a little bit of Parkinson's sprinkled
just a
in.
little bit.
No,
Um,
I've read them and they're wonderful, and you're just very direct, and I think it's very relatable. I think part of the reason that I was drawn to you in this space is just because you say it like it is. You know, there's no sort of beating around the bush, and I love that. And you do it with a sense of humor, and I think you're amazing. So again,
Thank you.
it's not
Likewise.
it's not it's not the best way to make new friends, getting Parkinson's. I'm sure there are. I'm sure there are more
There are easier ways to go
easier
about it.
ways. But I just love getting to meet new people in this space. And I think, you know, one of the things that I've learned, especially in the States, is that younger women with Parkinson's are underrepresented in, I don't know
Yeah.
about you, but when I tell this story all the time, and anyone who's on here who has read anything I've written will say, we know, we've heard the story, Allie, but the day that I was diagnosed, I was handed this packet of information, and it was sort of like getting to know Parkinson's or whatever it said. And every single picture in it was an older gentleman.
Yeah.
Every
Yeah.
single picture. The only women that were in there were portrayed as caretakers or daughters or
Yeah.
nurses. And I came home and I thought, am I literally the only young person with this disease? Like I didn't know anything about Parkinson's except
Yeah.
that, you know, I obviously knew who Michael J. Fox was, but that was it. And so
Same.
I think the more women the younger women, and not just younger, but just women in general, that come forward and say, I have this. This is
Yeah.
what it looks like. You can be, you know, a 40-year-old or 50-year-old or a 60-year-old woman with this disease. I just think it's important that we keep putting ourselves out there as sort of the other face of what Parkinson's is.
It's interesting you say that, because the EOPD, the Early Onset Parkinson's Disease Association in Ireland, they're on eopd.ie if anyone wants to check it out. They have a girl as part of their marketing campaigns, a young woman. So it stood out to me, because I was like, oh, a breath of fresh air. Oh, this is so
Yes,
good.
true,
Yeah.
true. And that's why, I mean, I literally came home that day and was Googling like how many women have Parkinson's, because my impression was at that moment, and now I've learned since, that almost 40% of people, of women, of people with Parkinson's in the States, I'm not sure what it is globally, but 40% of people with Parkinson's in the United States are women. And yet, it's just not, I think the organizations and the hopefully the hospital systems are trying to adapt and change to that perception. But I just, you know, the more of us that keep putting our faces out there and say, hi, it's me, it looks like me. So, or it looks like you with your fabulous bangs.
I was just at the hairdresser today as well. I had to get my roots done and everything. So, Callum, my hairdresser, did my bangs.
Oh, yeah, I love it. Callum, of course. Well, I appreciate your time, Annmarie. You're amazing. And anyone who wants to learn more about you should go to your website, right? Annmarie.com?
It's Annmarie
O'Connor.
Annmarie O'Connor, ANNMARIE, AnnmarieO'Connor.me or .com, or you can go to AnnmarieO'Connor.substack.com.
And read her amazing blogs, non-blog blogs, and check out check out her books. And we'll stay in touch, and we'll see how our journeys go in this crazy world we find ourselves in, which who would have thought?
I know. It was so lovely to catch up with you. Thank you for having me.
Happy holidays. All the best.
Happy holidays. Enjoy your afternoon.
Guys. Yeah, you too. Thanks, Annmarie.